Hello, hi there, welcome back to my channel. I am Amira and I make quilting videos here on YouTube, and today we have a fun tutorial on Jelly Roll Quilt Spinner, which is a free pattern on my blog. So if you want to grab that, I'll put a link in the description down below and we'll get started. So if you like this kind of video, please click like and subscribe, and let's get started. So we are going to start with this jelly roll. This one is a jelly roll that I got from Missouri Star Quilt Company. I'll put a link to all of my favorite quilting store down below. This one is Vanessa Creston, and she has a lot of ombre collection, and this is one of them. So I am going to start with this beautiful rainbow pastel to darker colors ombre, and there's 10 colors in here, and I'm going to do 2 sets of strips. And if you are working with something similar, you can do the same, but if you're not working with an ombre colors, you can actually just get started with your jelly roll. You're gonna have 2 sets of strips and just follow the pattern. I think a pattern calls for 10 pieces of strips for each strip set, so you're going to have 2 different strip sets with different colors. In my case, I have 2 sets of exactly the same colors as you can see here, so I'm just going to continue on and collect all of the strips to make 2 strip sets as the pattern calls for. We have 2 sets here, right here and here. What we're going to do now is we want to piece each of this next to each other. So what we're going to do is we are going to pick this one and we are going to piece this one next to each other. I'm just sewing a 1/4 of an inch away from that jagged edge. Okay, what I like to do is actually turn it back around, and I would like to press it again. So this my pressing is towards this way. So what I do is I pull it here a little bit just so that I catch some of these flip. So what we're going to do is just stretch it a little bit. So what I do is just stretch it a bit and then just press. Okay. So I would just press. Now I wish my table is a little bit bigger, but this is how I'm working with it. I am planning to make it better by tugging it slightly. So now it's all flat. So you can see how flat that is. So you don't want any folds. You can see that it was previously a little bit folded. See, all of these is a little bit folded if you just press it from the back. So that's what I like to do as well. Okay, so now we are going to bring it to the cutting table. So let's do that. So now I'm at my cutting table. What you want to do is you want to measure your width of piece. So since there are a lot of seams, so you might be losing a couple of, a little tiny bits along the way. So what you want to do is actually measure it. So ideally you would get 20.5 inch as per the pattern calls for, which means because these are 2.5 inch, meaning you actually lose a
a 1/4 inch every time if you use a 1/4 inch seams, so you should end up with a width of 20.5 inch. So but as you can see, even for me myself, I try to, you know, do as my best to keep the 1/4 inch, but sometimes, you know, you get a little bit bigger, and what you end up with is that it's not going to be the exact size, especially if you have a lot of seams. Another thing is because the jelly roll itself maybe have some variation in terms of the sizes itself as well. As you can see, even the length of it is different. You can see at the other end, you see that it's not even the same length, right? So what you want to do here, it doesn't matter, it's okay if it doesn't turn out as per pattern, but I'm going to teach you how you can actually work with it, because it really doesn't matter what is the size of that. So what you need to do now is cut a square. So we want to cut a square from this edge here to here. So since the width is going to determine what is the size of the length that you need, okay? So if I'm here, I'm measuring 20 inch, so I'm going to cut a 20 inch width. So the thing is, you want to make sure that all of this is pressed really flat as well. So I'm just going to cut 20 inch because I think that's the safe values. So hopefully both of your units are the same, because we're going to cut the same square. So I'm going to trim this one first at the edge. So you want to align this edge here to that side. It's a pretty big piece, so just be careful, take your time. So you want to trim a little bit of that excess. So I'm going to just trim that. Not too much, because we are going to need about 20 inch. So if the length is actually 44, you have about 3 to 4 inch to lose. So this one is probably an inch, and I'm just going to measure 20 inch. So that's 20 inch. So now, just before I cut, just another thing that you can actually do is, okay, I'm just going to put a pin. I'm going to put a pin right here. Just before you cut, you can also, what you can do, just to make sure that you're right, what you can do is actually fold it in half and make sure that this actually reaches to the top of that. So if it's there, then that means it's a good square, because we are going to cut that in diagonal later. So just a heads up. Now I am going to cut this at 24.5, okay? So we are going to cut that at 24.5, at 20 inch actually. So mine is 24 because I started at 4.5. So that should finish at 24. So the pattern does call for 20.5 inches. So just so you know that it doesn't have to be exactly as a pattern. As long as it's a square, it should be fine. So I'm going to cut 2 pieces out of the same piece. The reason being is that I have another panel, but it's exactly the same color. So you can see it's exactly the same because my jelly roll is like this. Now if you are going to do it with another type of jelly roll where you have a different set, you will have a different set of colors, 10 of different colors and 10 of different colors. So you want to keep this one for the backing or for an extra border. And you want to cut this one again the same squares, okay? But what I'm going to do here, I am just going to use the same one, because I would just have exactly the same one anyway from the other panel. I'm just going to keep that one for an extra border or the backing. So the pattern calls for the extras to be the backing. So I'm just going to cut it here. Just want to make sure that it's actually more than 20. Yeah, it's more than 20, should be fine. So I'm going to cut it right here to trim it up. Okay, every time I cut, I feel like I have to be really careful. Right? Just want to be really careful with my cuts, because you don't get a lot of cuts. You only get to cut once. You can measure a lot of time, right? Okay, so that is it. That's trimmed. Now I'm going to trim at 20. Again, similar process, right? So what you're going to do is actually measure 20 inch. Then I'm going to trim that. Okay. So once you've got that, now we are going to trim this in diagonal. Alright, what you can do here is you can fold it. This is the best so that you get very good cut. So you can fold it right there and make sure that it's folded right there. Now we are going to be working with the biased edge, so just be careful, just press a little bit. Alright, and then we are going to cut it on the diagonal following a line that you just did. Right there. There. So now you have two pieces like this, and we are going to piece this together like that. Oh, isn't that gorgeous? That's just beautiful. All right, now we have the other one, which we have cut just now, also the same.
Here I did mistake here, so you don't want to make the same thing. I actually went ahead and confidently cut through the diagonal without thinking. You don't want to do that. You want to look at the diagram in the pattern.
Oh gosh, I think I did it wrong. Okay, don't do my mistake. Okay, I made a mistake. Okay, now we're just going to work with it, right? We are just going to make it work. I'm supposed to follow my own pattern, and I'm not following my own pattern. Not to make the same mistake as mine. Alright, so that's where. Okay, so that's that. This is how it looks like before I cut it, right? I was supposed to actually get it according to the pattern. I was supposed to cut it this way, but that's okay, right? So I got this and I'm cutting this way. So the other piece, I have to cut exactly the same diagonal. If you're cutting this way, you must cut another one this way. It's even like in the image as well. So just be careful, put your piece together and do that carefully. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do this exactly the same, but since I have both of them, it's actually the same exact look. So what I'm going to do is I am going to turn it around and cut it this way. Again, the same thing, right? But I am going to have the lighter color at the bottom, the top, and the darker color at the bottom. And I am just going to trim that exactly the same way I did that before, right? So I am just going to do that. Please read the pattern, babes. Read your patterns. Please read your pattern. Okay. Alright, so now that we got that, we are going to put this together. So we put that like that, and we are going to sew this together. So that's how it looks like, and that is basically how you want to piece that. So you want to make sure that you cut it right. So I have two light colors on this side, which is more of the lighter ombres, and then the darker ombres for the other two. That is going to make a beautiful kind of contrast to this X. So let's go ahead and sew this together. So since you are working with all these bias edges, so this is a bias edge here, you want to be careful, okay? So now that you've pressed it, you want to press it well, and you are going to trim this into 26.5-inch square. The reason being is that if you don't cut it to 26.5, so let's say mine here, it turns out to be close to 27, but I'm going to trim it 26.5 either way, because the pattern actually have cuts for all the borders in the size that is already measured. So you want to be able to keep with that, otherwise you'll have to measure again and do the borders accordingly. So I would, since this is just about 27, you are not going to waste much, and it's good to trim up the corners so that you get a very good corner square. So I'm going to do that. So what I do now, you have all of the seams are biased, so you must be careful with it. It stretches really easily, so you don't want to pull too much, because then you'll have this permanent kind of like wavy borders. So you don't want to do that, so you just want to be careful at this stage. So that is 13.5 there. So what I would do now is I would just fold this another time, just make sure that everything is aligned, but not to pull it. So you just want to get everything in line. So at this stage I know that I want 13.25 here and 13.25 here. Okay, so I'm going to trim that off. So what I'm going to do now is I am going to make sure everything is aligned very well, and put another pin just to make sure all these 4 layers are all together. Okay, just like that. Okay. So now I'm going to measure. I'll put it on here nicely. I'm going to measure 13.25. The edge here 13.25, and that's how much I need to actually get go. Guys, change the blade on that one. Okay, Now I'm going to turn it around and do the same for the other side. So again, just aligning that edge right there. Since it's over here, we probably just have to shift it a little bit here, just so that I have a quarter here. So I'm using the mat as well to reference, so that it is actually in the center. So I'm going to trim that off. Okay, so that's done. Now that is already trimmed to the size that we need. It's time to put the border on. So now that it has the size that we want to be careful again. It's the edge, bias edge. So you can throw this away. So what I like to do now is I'm going to pin my borders. This is an important part of the pattern, because if you don't pin it, you are going to end up with a wavy border. So I have already cut my borders to size according to the pattern, and I am just going to take it and I'm just going to put it in place. Okay, so I'm going to take that. So this one is the first one. I'm going to put it right there. You can see that this is actually cut to the right size. It's exactly the right size. Now you don't want to go ahead and sew it directly, because you're going to end up with the bottom part is going to be longer than this. If you look at it like this, it's actually quite flat, and it should be exactly the same size because you cut it to the same size. Okay, so at this stage I'm going to go and get pinned, so that I don't want it to shift or move or stretch during my stitching at the machine. So what I'm going to do now is I am going to pin it. So take your time to do this, because this is an important part of this quilt. Okay, so I'm just going to pin that. So once you've got that pinned, now we are ready to go and sew it. So you want to go ahead and sew a 1/4 inch away from there, and then continuing on with all the other borders. Okay, so let's just go ahead and do that. So you want to go ahead, you can press it or you can just finger press at this stage, and then we're going to put another border on. Okay, so that's just going to be a repeat until the border surround is actually finished. So let's go ahead and do that. So at the stage of where I got my first border on, I am going to go ahead and press this at my pressing table, just so that I get a flat border before I put the other borders on. At this stage as well, you can see that the edges is no longer a bias. So, but my rules for putting on borders, always use your pins. So I'm going to use pins even though for the second round border and third round border and fourth, and continuing on. Because every time I put borders on, I think it's really important for you to put pins so that you don't get a wavy border. So let's get that done, and then we'll come back with the finished quilt top. So now I've got that all done, so I can't really show you, but I'll try and show you the look of it when I'm standing on it. So that's, I'm done with all the 4 borders according to the pattern. So here at this stage, I'm going to follow along with the pattern, which asks you to do the backing. So what I'm going to do now is actually do the backing with the leftover squares that we have earlier on. Alright, so I've pressed it, and I'll put this aside because this is going to be my quilt top. But I'll give you an idea of how to make it bigger using this if you don't want to make it as a backing at the end of this video. So stay tuned, I'll give you some ideas on how to use this as the part of the front instead of putting it at the back. But I love a good creative backing, so this is what I'm going to do. So according to the pattern, you need to cut this in half, so the leftover, so you should have 2. But since I've already made a mistake, I have one that is triangle because I cut it wrong just now. 2 pieces of this, but now I've got only one. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make use of this only. I'm just going to leave this one out, and according to the pattern, you're going to use 10 inches, which is a big, wide kind of like length to make this kind of like this backing here, right? But now I'm going to make this slightly thinner so that I can still have 2 pieces. All right, and I am going to add in labeled at the back as well. So this is what it looks like. So we have this. So these are some of the labels that is available on my Quilt Label Wizard. So if you are in my Quilt Label Wizard course, you can actually learn how to make this. In fact, this is a free template in there. You can just change your name right here. So it's really easy to do, and you can have lots and lots of labels at a time. So I have, like me, I have now a lot. That's plenty that I can actually use. This one is kind of pretty cute. I think it sort of matches the colors, or this one. So this one is kind of cute too. This one is, I'm not going to choose this one. This is kind of pretty cute and sweet. So either that or this, Joy and Love. This one is also nice. So I'm going to keep going with this one. So I'm going to use this later at the back. So I'm going to show you how I do it. So I am going to trim this. So if you follow the pattern asks you to cut a 10-inch strip. So basically this is the leftover from our blocks that we made earlier on, right? From the strip set. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just measure this. How much is it? It's going to be 11 inch. So the pattern did ask to actually just cut it 10 inch. I did give some leeways to that, so you can actually get 10 inch. So what I'm going to do here, I'm trying to maximize it, because it doesn't have to be exact, but if you want to follow the pattern, you can. Okay, it's got that trimmed, so that's leftovers. I'm not wasting as much. Press this a little bit. I'm gonna press it so that I know where the center is, and then I'm gonna trim it. Okay, I'm gonna use that line as a guide, just to make sure that everything is aligned. I'm going to make sure that one of the lines actually aligned to that. Okay, so according to the pattern, this is how you should do it, and you should combine these two together. So when you combine these two together, so if you didn't make the mistake like I did, you should actually have 4 pieces. So you should have one strips and then another strip from the other part. So you want to piece this together, and then you have a long that's going to be long enough, and you can add a few more on the sides here with the leftovers jelly rolls that you have. So I still have some jelly rolls left over, so I can put that extra if I need to for the backing. Alright, okay, so that is how the pattern calls for. Since I already made a mistake, what I'm going to do is cut this in half. Okay, alright, so now what I'm going to do is I am going to take this one, the light colored on top, and then the darker color one at the bottom, since I'm using like ombre colors. So you can see this is going to be my strips for the backing. So you can do the same. If you didn't make a mistake, then you should have a larger strips for the backing, and you can add in some whites in the middle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this in the middle right there. So I am going to cut a background fabric. I'm just going to use white. I'm going to cut it exactly the same size as the same width of this one, so that I can actually continue in right here and right here, and then I'll go have I'm going to have a background here and a background here. So I'll come back when this is actually pieced together, because this is basically just simple. You can just stitch this all lengthwise, and then make sure it's actually large enough for your quilt top. Okay. For the backing, I am going to opt for just a corner. So I really like buying this. I lately have been kind of like loving having a bolt of background fabric, because I tend to use it as backing, part of the backing, and also as the background. So because I tend to actually buy smaller ones, and then there's no label on it, and I keep getting like all different whites in one quilt. So I like to have this. I'm going to put a link down below where you can get it for discount. It's 20% off. and also a few places where you can get it. Actually, I got it from a couple of places. So that's, I'm just going to cut this a strip that is going to be a width of this. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to line it up a little bit, and then I'm going to trim the edges. So I'm going to measure this. This is 3 3/4. So this is going to be 44-inch wide, which is going to be enough because the quilt itself is only 42.5. Because then I'm going to add this, I put it in the middle, so it's going to be longer, right? So this is going to be enough for the strips. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to sew this. So I'm going to cut it in half. So this is the middle. So I'm going to cut it in half. So once you've got that, what I'm going to do is I am going to stitch this together. So it's going to be a part of that patchwork. So that's how I like to use my my quilt labels. You can even put a hit and bond at the back and then just stick to it and just do a raw edge like a zigzag. That is another way you can use this labels. Alright, let's go. Alright, just before, because in case you guys have never done this before, I'm just going to show you how I do it. So basically I have a center which is here, and I just crease the center right here, and then I place it together like so, pin it, and then I'll just sew from one end to the other. So this one is like, I didn't measure, so I just left it extra, so I'll cut that later. So let's say I'm going to do the bottom part here. What I'm going to do is actually press this, because I know this is the center and I do want it to be at the center, and that's the crease that I'm going to match up with these seams that I just made from the half, right? So I'm going to put it right there and pin it in place. And then I can pin all the way here too. Okay, I can pin all the way here just to make sure that it matches up with this top part as well, because then you're going to trim this later, and then you're going to put in the top half of the backing and the other top half of the backing later at the bottom as well. So I'm not going to pin much, I'm just making sure that it's actually where it is supposed to be before I get to the machine. Okay, alright, so that is how I do it, and then I'm going to just sew a 1/4 inch, and then we're done with the center of the quilt backing. Okay, let's segue a little bit. So I already pieced this and I already pieced the thing together, and then I realized I forgot one step of the pattern. So the pattern did actually calls you to kind of like, before you strip this into half, you actually have to add 2 strips at least at the side, because it's not going to be long enough for your backing. So I didn't do that. You can actually add 4 strips if you need larger backings, because sometimes when you're looking on long arms you might need a larger background, but if it's 2 strips it's going to be enough. So I actually pieced 2 strips now, and I'm going to piece it next to this. So I've already removed it a little bit. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to, you know, work with it, right? So I'm going to strip that, and then I'm going to piece it back together to this piece here. Okay, don't make my mistake. Make sure you read your pattern before you do it. So there is already written here, so make sure you don't skip that step like me. It's my own pattern, but I'm not listening to my own advice. So, but anyway, we learn from our mistakes. I think we learn better from our mistakes. That's what I always tell my students. Alright, so let's do that, and then we'll come back. Okay, now I am done with the backing. Isn't that beautiful? I am going to show you guys a picture of it here somewhere, because this I can't show you the whole thing, but I just love how the strips kind of like in the center, and then you have your quilt labels in there. So if you follow the pattern, this is what you should get, but a bigger, because I did make a mistake. But if you like a smaller one, that's also good. So at the end of it, like, even for this pattern, because the size is very tight, it's actually 42.5 by 42.5, and your fabric gauge is about 44. I'm actually making the backing about 44 inches up to the edges. I'm not even cutting that, but I know that this is going to be removed it is going to be like that when you are actually quilted it, like it's going to be trimmed off. I just need that space to baste it well. So I'm going to go ahead and baste it. I'm going to baste it on the floor, so I'm not going to show you that process, but I might take a picture of it. I'll put it up on here right now if you want to see that. But I'll baste it and then I'll come back with the free motion quilting on this one. Okay, so basically I am doing this kind of like floral puffy thing, like an echo. So if you want to learn how to free motion quilt, I do have a course in my school platform, so online school platform. So you basically, this is one of the pattern that we learn in there as well. It's called the flower echoes. So yeah, so I'm doing that, and I'm just continuing to finish off this area here. I'm going to kind of cover this area here, so let's do that. So that's my alarm to actually go ahead and check my kids to get them ready for school. So I only have 5 minutes. I'm just going to show you a little bit more and then I'm going to go.
So I'm done with the quilting and now it's time to trim. So I'm not going to show you how the details about this, but basically I'm just trying to get the corners right angled and then getting everything as straight as possible without wasting as much. And if you do this right, you should be able to actually get a very nice square quilt that measured about 42.5 inches. And if you want this pattern, make sure you grab that inside the description down below. There is a link to put your to fill in the form to actually get this, and you should be able to get it right straight away. So my automation will actually go ahead and send you the pattern, but sometimes it goes into spam, so don't be mad. Just drop me an email and I should be able to actually just retrieve that for you. And if you don't want to reply to me, that's fine as well. You can actually just wait for my newsletter to come, and usually I have a link and also a password to actually go into the library that I have on the blog, and you can actually grab it from there as well. So don't worry, the pattern is there. I know sometimes automation can be a little bit crazy and it just doesn't work as smooth as we want it to be. So yeah, just hopefully you know that it's not a scam, because I do have the pattern and I just want to send it to you, because I do know that some people don't get it, but I do want to give it to you. But I just want to give it to all my subscribers as well, as a sign of appreciation, because I really truly appreciate you guys having to listen to me, or to just even read my emails, because that is truly something that I feel like, we're friends here and we just want to share all the things quilting. So if you like this kind of video, please make sure you click like and subscribe, and also comment down below, because sometimes I do feel like I need some encouragement in making videos. And yeah, hopefully to see you again in the next video, and enjoy making your jelly roll quilt spinner. Bye bye.